Do you want to be ahead of the game for the latest in arts, music, cuisine, and entertainment across the Middle East's most dynamic capital cities? Al Monitor is proud to launch our City Pulse newsletters, focused exclusively on local news, starting in Riyadh, Dubai, Istanbul, and Doha. Each week, our on-the-ground writers in these cities cover the latest cultural happenings and trends, so you have everything you need to know for the best local experiences. To subscribe for free, go to almonitor.com, that's al-monitor.com, and sign up on our newsletter page.
The problem from Hamas's point of view is once they give up the hostages, they will be vulnerable. They'll be extremely vulnerable, and that worries them, and I would worry me. But so there is a huge amount of trust that they need to put in the plan, in their supporters, in the Arab and Muslim countries, and that's there's a lot of problems with that.
Welcome back to the Al Monitor Brief. I'm Adam Lucente. U.S. President Donald Trump announced on Monday that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has agreed to a plan to end the Gaza war. The 20-point plan includes an immediate ceasefire, the withdrawal of Israeli troops from the enclave, and the release of the remaining living and dead Israeli hostages. Israel will then release more than 2,000 Palestinian prisoners, among other terms. The plan calls for a technocratic committee independent of Hamas to run Gaza, echoing the Egypt-led plan proposed earlier this year. The plan also allows for amnesty for Hamas members willing to lay down their weapons, a pathway for members of the group to leave Gaza for third countries, and a massive increase in aid to the Palestinian territory. At the time of recording, Tuesday afternoon, New York time, Hamas had yet to formally respond to Trump. Some Hamas officials went on Arabic television Monday to say they had not been informed of Trump's plan, but would study it. The Palestinian Authority called the plan, quote, sincere, and foreign ministers of Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, Turkey, and other Muslim states said in a joint statement that they welcomed it. In this episode, we'll hear from Al Monitor's Palestine newsletter author, Daoud Kuttab, and Al Monitor's State Department correspondent, Elizabeth Hagedorn. Daoud and Elizabeth take us through whether Hamas could actually accept a deal of this kind, if there is sufficient trust to end the war, and what it all means for post-conflict Gaza plans. Hope you enjoy. First, here's our interview with Daoud Kuttab on the new Gaza plan. Daoud, welcome back to the Al Monitor Brief.
Thank you very much.
Daoud, is this plan something Hamas could actually accept? Why or why not? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's going to be a difficult pill to swallow, but a few things that need to be said. First, the idea of Israel withdrawing in return for full release of the hostages has been Hamas's calling for a long time. The problem is not the plan itself. The problem is the level of trust that anybody has in both Israel and even Trump. That's where the problem is. If in a normal situation where you can trust the leaders, then it's a good plan because even though it's missing, for example, a timeline. Israel, the only timeline in its entire plan is when the hostages will be released. There's no other timeline, which means that it's up to the Israelis to decide when and how they will withdraw. There's no impediment, there's no accountability, there's no system that ensures that Israelis would carry out what they did. There's no reciprocity, there's no something Hamas does and then the Israelis do as they do with the prisoner exchanges. This is going to be totally, to a large part, up to the Israelis, and that's what worries Hamas. On the other hand, the fact that Arab countries, Muslim countries, Turkey, Qatar, and others are all on board, basically it's their word and their promise, based on the promise made by Trump in New York to them, that might allow Hamas to take a chance again, even though the Israelis, tried to kill the negotiators a few months ago. So yes, I think it is possible. I think what we've seen is basically not a real plan, but an outline. It doesn't really go into a lot of the specifics that we need to know and that Hamas needs to know. But in its larger situation, it's logical. It's a logical plan. The problem is not in that. The problem is in the trust factor.
And Daoud, on that note of the regional reactions, do you think the regional welcoming of Trump's announcement will pressure Hamas? Or how much will it pressure Hamas?
It's hard to say. It's really hard to say what would happen. I think Hamas has to weigh overriding consensus right now in supporting this plan, and the skepticism that this plan will not deliver what it promises to deliver. I mean, Trump seemed to have helped Netanyahu come down the tree, but we've seen Netanyahu before reverse himself many, many times. So the idea that this would stand just as everybody expected to stand is probably not going to happen. The problem from Hamas's point of view is once they give up the hostages, they will be vulnerable. They'll be extremely vulnerable, and that worries them, and I would worry me. But there is a huge amount of trust that they need to put in the plan, in their supporters, in the Arab and Muslim countries, and that's there's a lot of problems with that. Whether the plan will be carried out exactly as we heard it, as read it, I think Hamas will try before giving its final okay to make some changes, the way that Netanyahu made changes to the plan that Trump had announced to the Arab and Muslim countries in leaders in New York. Again, whether that will be successful or not remains to be seen, because once you open up, as the Israelis did, to a well thought plan, then everybody can want to have their own changes as well.
And how much does this plan conform with the Palestinian Authority's plans for post-war Gaza?
Look, it's not the best plan from the Palestinian Authority's point of view, but there are a number of things in its favor. For example, the role of Arab countries in setting up and creating the transitional committee, the fact that the staff in Gaza, the law in Gaza, the passports and IDs in Gaza are all going to still be issued by the Palestinian government, means that Gaza will be under same law that the West Bank is under, will be run by the same government agencies and same public servants that already existed and are on the payroll of Ramallah. So I think they feel comfortable that they not only have the Arab and Muslim leaders with them, but after the round of recognitions by major Western countries, they're now coordinating with these countries to ensure that the Palestinian statehood goal, it doesn't go away.
And finally, how do you think the plan is being received by people in Gaza?
Look, everybody wants the end of this war in Gaza, outside of Gaza, around the world. This has been a terrible war, has had an extreme high level of suffering, killing, and famine, and people disoriented, people losing sight of their lives and their future and their schools and their churches, their mosques and the bakeries and so on. It's going to take a long, long way to come back to normal. But at least the hemorrhage has to end. And I think if this plan has any chance of ending the daily killings, the daily suffering, and the beginning of resolving, existential issues of life, water, electricity, food, and so on, then of course they're in favor of any plan, regardless of who's behind it, who's for it, to end this nightmare.
Daoud, thanks a lot for your time, and we look forward to more of your reporting on this.
Take care.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with our interview with Elizabeth Hagedorn after this short break.
Today's transformation of the Middle East is at the center of global geopolitics. Whether you're an analyst, diplomat, executive, or academic, you need the best reporting and analysis to understand what's really happening on the ground and what it means for the world. Al-Monitor is the award-winning independent leader in Middle East news. From Riyadh to Beirut, Abu Dhabi to Doha, and Baghdad to Tehran, our team of over 100 expert journalists report daily on the top stories driving the regional trends. Download our mobile app and subscribe to Al Monitor to follow what leaders and decision makers are reading every day. Go to almonitor.com, that's AL-MONITOR.com, and use promo code POD25, POD25, for a discount.
Okay, we're back. Now let's hear from Elizabeth Hagedorn in Washington. Elizabeth, welcome back to the Al Monitor Brief.
Hi, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Elizabeth, how does this recent Gaza plan from the Trump administration compare to others that have been presented over the course of the conflict?
Well, I would say it differs in a few big ways. First, this is a comprehensive ceasefire and hostage release as opposed to a phased agreement. So in January, for example, when Israel and Hamas reached that short-lived 2-month ceasefire, the initial agreement was for the hostages to come out in stages and for Israel to release its Palestinian prisoners in stages as well. Whereas under this plan, the hostages and prisoners would be released in one batch. There is something else that really sets this Trump plan apart, and that's while in previous proposals, those centered mostly around the ceasefire terms, this plan also attempts to envision a political and economic future for the Gaza Strip, one without Hamas. According to the plan, a committee of Palestinian technocrats would handle day-to-day public services in Gaza. They would be overseen by a so-called Board of Peace that would be chaired by President Trump and would include former British leader Tony Blair. Under the plan, that Trump-led board would govern Gaza until the Palestinian Authority implements the needed reforms to take over. And finally, this plan also calls for the disarmament of Hamas, previously a non-negotiable for Hamas, and one reason why its acceptance of this agreement is far from guaranteed.
And regional states were quick to welcome the plan. What do you think this says about their influence on President Trump and also the state of U.S. relations with the region?
Well, I think that you had the foreign ministers of 8 Arab and Muslim majority countries come together yesterday to issue this joint statement really does put some pressure on Hamas to accept its terms. Even Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas welcomed the plan, and that's notable considering just a week ago, the Trump administration had banned him from traveling to the United States to attend the General Assembly in New York. Now, to be clear, there are some elements of the plan that the PA and the Arab states take issue with. Those include the possibility for Israel to keep its troops indefinitely in a security perimeter around Gaza. Also, I should point out that while this agreement makes reference to Palestinian statehood, it stops short of outlining how it would be attained. That said, at the end of the day, this is an agreement that would stop the bloodshed in Gaza after nearly 2 years of war, and that is something the region can get behind. Now that Israel has accepted the deal, it's really up to these Arab states to persuade Hamas to agree.
And on that note, what main obstacles do you see in terms of the plan, one being agreed to by Hamas and everyone, and also being implemented if it does take effect?
And it's still a big if, Adam. I mean, the primary obstacle here is whether Hamas says yes. We don't know how the group will respond to a ceasefire proposal that crosses some of its biggest red lines. Those include a requirement that Hamas lay down its arms and release all the hostages. The group says it's studying the proposal, but some of the unofficial comments that we have leaking out from Hamas are not terribly optimistic, nor was the statement from its ally Islamic Jihad that condemned the proposal as biased against the Palestinians. Trump today said he would give Hamas 3 or 4 days to respond, and after that, he said Israel gets full U.S. backing, in his words, to do what it needs to do to finish the job against Hamas in Gaza. I should also point out in Israel, there is also domestic opposition to a deal that includes language recognizing the right of Palestinian self-determination and statehood. Far-right members of Netanyahu's government have already condemned what Finance Minister Smotrich called a surrender plan. But so far, they've yet to make good on that long-held threat to collapse Netanyahu's government if he makes too many concessions. But Adam, to your earlier question, the biggest obstacle, at least today, is will Hamas say yes to this agreement?
Elizabeth, thanks a lot for your time, and we look forward to more of your reporting on this from Washington.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks for listening to the Al Monitor Brief. Be sure to follow Al Monitor for more on the stories impacting the Middle East. Until next time, I'm Adam Lucente.